My stepbrother raised his glass and said, "May this one actually last." The hall erupted with laughter, bright, echoing, relentless. Crystal glasses chimed, music paused, and I sat frozen. My smile locked in place, while humiliation burned down my neck. For a moment, everything blurred. The chandeliers, the white roses, the polite faces trying to hide their amusement. And in that flash of silence between laughs, I realized everyone had just witnessed Dylan do what he'd done his entire life: make me the joke. Before we go deeper, let me introduce the people who shaped this story. Dylan, my stepbrother. 30, born with charm tattooed on his smile. The kind of guy who could make trouble sound like an adventure. Everyone loved him, especially the people who never saw the wreckage he left behind. Lily, my fiancée. 28, soft-spoken, graceful, a heart too kind for her own good. She's the calm in every storm, and somehow she saw something in me worth standing beside. And my father, 64, a man who always mistook Dylan's arrogance for confidence and my silence for weakness. The kind who thinks loyalty means never questioning his own blood, even when that blood keeps cutting you open. Dear listeners, before we dive in, tell me, from where are you watching this story tonight? Drop your city and country in the comments. It always amazes me how far our stories travel. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and join our growing family. We share stories that will make you feel, think, and sometimes question what you'd do in their place. Now, let's get back to the story. My name's Ethan Reed, 32 years old, and this is the story of how a single toast at my rehearsal dinner changed everything I believed about family. The night was supposed to be perfect. We'd rented a vineyard estate outside Napa. Rows of vines rolled into the distance, catching the orange glow of sunset. Inside, 100 candles shimmered off polished glass, and laughter floated through the air. For the first time in years, I felt like life was falling into place. Then, Dylan picked up the microphone. At first, I wasn't worried. He was grinning, already a few drinks deep, talking about how his big brother had finally found someone willing to put up with him. People chuckled. It seemed harmless until it wasn't. Now, I've known Ethan my whole life. He's a great guy, hardworking, loyal, dependable, but relationships? He paused just long enough to let curiosity hang in the air. Well, let's just say he's better at building houses than keeping them warm. Laughter exploded again, louder this time, emboldened. Crystal's cousins covered their mouths, her parents exchanged uneasy looks. My father chuckled, shaking his head like a man hearing an old, familiar joke. And Dylan basked in it. My hand tightened around my wine glass until I thought it might crack. Lily placed her hand over mine, gentle, apologetic. Her eyes said, "Please don't make a scene." I didn't. I never did. Dylan's smile widened. He raised his glass higher. "To Ethan and Lily. May this one actually work out." The sound that followed wasn't laughter anymore. It was noise, clinking, murmuring, a storm of polite chaos while my dignity bled out quietly at the head table. When the toast ended, conversation drifted elsewhere, but the tension stayed. I could feel it wrapping around me. The awkward glances, the half-hearted smiles, the whispered apologies from people who'd laughed a little too hard. My fiancée tried to lighten the mood. She'd never been one to bear a grudge. "He didn't mean it like that," she whispered. "Dylan just doesn't know when to stop." Yeah, that was the problem. He'd never known when to stop. As the night stretched on, I moved through it like a ghost, shaking hands, nodding, smiling for photos. But inside, I was replaying years of history in flashes. Childhood dinners where Dylan's jokes made my father laugh louder than I'd ever heard him laugh at me. High school graduations where Dylan's smallest achievements drew speeches, while mine drew polite claps. Family holidays where every story somehow ended with me being the punchline. And every single time, my father would say, "Come on, son, he's just teasing. Don't be so serious." But this night wasn't just another dinner. This was supposed to be my beginning, my one night free from his shadow. Later, I slipped outside for air. The vineyard stretched quiet under the moonlight, the crickets louder than my thoughts. Through the open doors, I could still hear Dylan laughing somewhere inside, probably retelling his toast to anyone who would listen. I stood there, thinking about how easy it had always been for him. How the world bent in his direction while I was expected to nod and adapt. How my father's praise always landed on Dylan like sunlight while I learned to survive in the shade. That's when I heard footsteps. Dylan's voice followed, smooth and amused. "Hey, there he is. You okay, big guy?" I turned slowly. He was still smiling, that same smirk he wore whenever he thought he'd gotten away with something. "Nice speech," I said evenly. "Come on," he laughed. "Don't tell me you're upset. It was a joke. Everyone loved it." I bet they did. He clapped my shoulder. "Lighten up, Ethan. You don't want to start your marriage being the serious guy. Lily's family seems great. They'll get over it." That's when I realized something. He didn't see what he'd done. He never did. In his mind, humiliation was humor. Control was charm, and consequences, well, those were for other people. "Right," I said quietly. "You're probably right." He grinned, pleased with himself, and strolled back inside. And standing there, under the quiet sky, I knew something inside me had shifted. This time, I wasn't just going to swallow it. This time, the laughter wouldn't fade and life go on. This time, I was done letting Dylan write my story.
The next morning, the vineyard was quiet except for the faint hum of delivery vans unloading flowers for the ceremony. I stood on the balcony of the guest house, staring at the mist curling over the vines. It looked peaceful out there, too peaceful for how I felt inside. My tux jacket hung on the chair beside me, pressed and ready. The wedding was only hours away, but my stomach was a knot of things I couldn't name. Lily slipped her arms around me from behind, her cheek against my back. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I tried," I answered. She hesitated. "You're still thinking about last night, aren't you?" I turned, forcing a small smile. "It's fine. Dylan was just being Dylan." She studied me. "You're not fine, and he wasn't joking." Her honesty caught me off guard. For the first time, she wasn't trying to smooth things over. She looked hurt, maybe even embarrassed. "My parents kept asking if you two always talk like that. I didn't know what to tell them." That hit harder than Dylan's toast, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about how his words had changed the way others saw me. I reached for her hand. "Let's just get through today. After tonight, none of this'll matter." But I already knew that wasn't true. Downstairs, the air smelled of coffee and cologne. My father was laughing with Dylan near the breakfast table. They looked like a mirror image, same confident stance, same easy laughter. When my father noticed me, he said, "Morning, son. You ready for the big day?" "Yeah," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder. "You handled last night like a gentleman. That's what I'm proud of, keeping your cool." I almost laughed. Proud. He was proud that I'd swallowed humiliation again. Dylan grinned, biting into a croissant. "You gotta admit, it was a good line, right? People loved it." I poured coffee without answering. He went on, cheerful, oblivious. "Relax, man. You'll have your chance to roast me at my wedding, if that ever happens." My father chuckled. "With your charm, I doubt you'll ever be single long enough." Their laughter filled the kitchen, and I felt something slide into place inside me. Not anger this time. Clarity. By noon, the rehearsal bustle had begun. Guests arrived in tailored suits and pastel dresses. Photographers moved through the garden like ghosts, and Lily's parents greeted everyone with that effortless poise people practice their whole lives. Dylan was everywhere, helping guests, joking with bridesmaids, taking credit for arrangements he hadn't made. I watched him from a distance, studying every detail. He had that same charisma I'd envied as a teenager, the ability to command attention without effort. But beneath it, I could see the cracks, how he relied on approval like oxygen. Without an audience, he faded. That realization changed something. For the first time, I didn't feel small standing next to him. I felt patient. During a quiet moment, Lily's father pulled me aside. "Ethan, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your stepbrother has quite the sense of humor." I smiled politely. "He does. He's confident, almost too confident. Not really the type you expect in a family like yours." That comment lingered even after he walked away. For the first time, someone outside my family saw what I'd been living with all these years. It was small, but it felt like vindication. As the sun dipped low, the rehearsal turned into a casual dinner. Dylan was telling another story near the bar, something about a business deal I'd lost years ago. I caught fragments of it, and poor Ethan thought he'd hit the jackpot until the client called me instead. More laughter. Even my father smiled. That story wasn't just embarrassing, it wasn't even true. The deal had failed because Dylan had given the client false information, then blamed me when the paperwork collapsed. I'd taken the fall to keep the peace. Now he was retelling it like a party trick. I walked outside again, letting the noise fade behind me. The vineyard stretched endless and quiet, rows of vines catching the last orange light. The air smelled of soil and oak. I should have felt anxious about the ceremony, but all I felt was stillness, the kind that comes right before a storm breaks. For years, Dylan had written my story in punchlines. Maybe it was time I wrote the next chapter myself. When I came back inside, Lily was on the dance floor with her friends. Dylan stood near the bar laughing with the photographer, holding my father's whiskey glass. He looked up when he saw me and smirked like nothing could touch him. He was wrong. I walked over calmly. "Hey, Dylan." He turned, still grinning. "What's up, best man?" "I need a favor. Can we meet tomorrow morning before the ceremony? Just you and me. There's something I want to talk about." He looked intrigued. "You're not going to punch me, are you?" I smiled faintly. If I wanted to, I'd have done it already. He laughed, clinking his glass. "Fair enough. Sure thing, bro. Sunrise Summit. Got it." He thought it was another joke. That was fine. I wanted him relaxed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the dim guest room, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Lily was fast asleep beside me, her breathing steady, her hand resting on my chest. I watched her and thought about everything she didn't know, about the years of rivalry, of quiet cruelty I had learned to ignore. But what haunted me most wasn't Dylan's laughter. It was my father's silence. He'd heard every insult, every dig, and he'd chosen to laugh instead of stop it. I realized then that I'd spent half my life trying to earn respect from people who had no intention of giving it. Tomorrow, that would end. Not with a fight, not with shouting, but with something Dylan understood even less than humility. Consequences. The first pale light of dawn slid through the curtains. I slipped out of bed quietly, dressed, and stepped outside. The vineyard was wrapped in fog, silver and weightless. Dylan was already there, near the terrace, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said, handing me one. "So, what's up? Wedding jitters?" I took the cup. "Something like that." He leaned on the railing, sipping his drink. "Relax, man. You'll forget all about my little joke by noon." I stared at him. "You really think last night was a joke?" He frowned. "Of course it was. Everyone laughed." "Yeah, everyone did." He shrugged, missing the weight in my voice. "You worry too much, Ethan. That's why people can't relax around you. You make everything serious." I nodded slowly. "Maybe, but ever wonder what happens when serious people finally stop laughing?" He chuckled, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, finishing my coffee. "You'll find out soon enough." He laughed again, but it sounded nervous this time. I turned toward the house, the morning light catching on the vineyard like liquid gold. The day had barely begun, but something in me had already shifted for good. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about balance. about finally putting an end to a story that had gone on too long. And as the first guests began to arrive for the ceremony, I knew one thing for certain. Dylan had just given his last performance on my expense. Because before the vows were spoken, before the music started and the cameras rolled, he'd learn what it felt like to be the one standing in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons.
The vineyard glowed like a painting the morning of the wedding, rows of green stretching toward a pale blue sky, the air filled with the scent of lavender and freshly cut grass. Guests in pastel suits and flowing dresses arrived, their chatter weaving through the music of the string quartet. It should have been the happiest day of my life. In a way, it still was, but not for the reason anyone expected. Lily looked stunning. Her dress shimmered under the sunlight, soft and simple, like her. She smiled at me before the ceremony, nervous but trusting, completely unaware of the conversation I'd had with Dylan at sunrise. I'd promised myself that whatever I did, it wouldn't touch her joy. She deserved peace. Dylan deserved clarity. I spotted him near the reception tent, laughing with my father and a cluster of guests. He was telling another story, gesturing wildly, his voice loud enough to carry. It didn't matter what the story was. I could see the familiar rhythm in his performance. The smirk, the pause, the laughter. Always the same. But this time, the audience wasn't what he thought it was. At 10 that morning, while Dylan was still sleeping off his hangover, I'd met with someone else, Lily's father, Robert Daniels, a man who valued composure above all else. I told him the truth about Dylan, about the toast, about the years of mockery that had become my family's favorite pastime. I didn't ask for pity. I just told him I didn't want his family to think I shared any part of Dylan's behavior. Robert had listened quietly, then asked one question. Would you like me to handle it, or would you prefer to? I'll handle it, I said. He nodded, approvingly. Then do it with dignity. Let your character speak louder than his voice. That was the moment the plan began forming. The ceremony itself was perfect. The music swelled. Lily walked down the aisle, her hand trembling in mine as we said our vows under the archway of roses. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I kissed her and felt for a fleeting second like maybe everything would be fine. Then came the reception. The tent gleamed with chandeliers and gold-trimmed tables, the wine flowed, laughter filled the air, and once again, Dylan found his way to the microphone. All right, you all know me, the infamous stepbrother. Don't worry, I'll keep this one short. Ethan asked me to behave. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But come on, how could I resist saying a few words about our favorite perfectionist, the guy who builds things for a living and still managed to forget his wedding ring this morning? The crowd chuckled. Lily's smile faltered. I hadn't forgotten the ring. It had been in Dylan's pocket. I'd seen it earlier when he patted my shoulder and jokingly said, "You sure you've got everything?" I smiled back and said nothing, because I was waiting for this exact moment. He went on, his confidence swelling with every laugh. Seriously though, Ethan's one of the good ones. He works hard, worries too much, and somehow found a woman willing to marry him anyway. Let's drink to that miracle. The audience laughed again, but this time something felt off. The laughter was thinner, hesitant. People were looking around, reading each other's faces. The tension was subtle but growing. I let it breathe. Then I stood. "Dylan," I said, my voice calm, "before you sit down, I have something to add." The microphone squealed as I took it from him. He looked amused, maybe even flattered. "Go ahead, big bro. Your turn to roast me." I smiled faintly. "No, I'm done with roasting. I'd rather toast." I turned to the guests. Most of you know Dylan. He's charming, funny, unforgettable, and for years, he's been the loudest voice in the room, including last night when he decided to remind me, my wife, and her family that I'm apparently terrible at relationships. The room fell silent. I let the quiet stretch. I laughed it off, like I always have. But this morning, I realized something. Dylan's jokes have always been less about humor and more about control, and I've been giving him that control since we were kids. Dylan's grin faltered. "Ethan, come on. Don't turn this into..." I raised my hand. "Let me finish." I looked out over the crowd. See, when you grow up being someone's punchline, you learn to stay quiet. You learn to let people laugh because the alternative, speaking up, means becoming the villain. But sometimes silence just feeds the cruelty. I glanced at my father, whose smile had frozen. I stayed silent for years, and you, I met Dylan's eyes, mistook silence for weakness. A murmur spread across the tent. I don't want to embarrass you, Dylan, I said softly, but I do want you to understand that today isn't your stage. This isn't another dinner where you get to write the script. This is my life, and starting right now, I'm taking it back. For a long second, no one moved. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then someone, Robert, Lily's father, stood and began to clap. Slowly, firmly. The sound grew until the entire tent was applauding, not raucously, respectfully, with understanding. Dylan's face had gone pale. He forced a laugh, but it died halfway through. Wow, okay, that's dramatic. Guess I deserve that. He tried to make a joke of it, but nobody laughed. Not this time. The spotlight that had always adored him had turned harsh, unflattering. I handed the mic to the band leader and walked off the stage. Lily met me halfway, eyes shining. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her hand found mine, and I felt something settle inside me. Peace. Later that evening, as the sun melted into the hills, Dylan tried to talk to me. "You really made me look bad out there," he muttered, his tone caught between anger and guilt. "I didn't make you look bad," I said quietly. "You just finally looked like yourself." He didn't reply. He turned and walked away, the applause from earlier still echoing faintly behind us. Weeks passed. The video of my speech spread through our guests' social media circles, friends, coworkers, even extended family. Comments poured in, admiration, support, even quiet confessions from people who'd seen Dylan's behavior for what it was all along. The family narrative had shifted. My father called once. "You humiliated him," he said. "He's devastated." I took a deep breath. He's had a lifetime to think about how his words affect people. Maybe now he finally will. There was silence on the line, then a soft click as he hung up. Months later, I heard Dylan had lost his job. A coworker had seen the wedding video and realized how he treated people behind closed doors. His reputation, the one built on charm, was unraveling. I didn't feel joy hearing it, just inevitability. I'd moved on. Lily and I bought a small house overlooking the coast. My business grew faster than ever. New clients found me through that same video, calling it the most graceful confrontation they'd ever seen. Irony, maybe, but it fit.
Sometimes at night, I'd sit on the porch with a glass of wine, listening to the sea, and think about how long I'd let other people define me. Dylan, my father, even my own silence. But not anymore.
Because the day the laughter died wasn't just about shutting him up. It was about reclaiming my voice. Thanks for joining me, and please rate my story out of 10.